Jowi Taylor, all the way from Canada, Toronto. Good morning.
Good morning. What a
afternoon over
afternoon
here.
to you. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, afternoon to me. Thank you so much for coming on the channel to talk about this amazing project of yours. Six String Nation, the Voyageur guitar, pieces of Canadian history rolled into this beautiful instrument.
So, I mean, Six String Nation really is the story of Canada as you've never heard it before or held it before. The whole point of this project is to share it and have people hold it. I think a lot of people's impressions of Canada are culled from the sort of stereotypes that we ourselves use far too much. I think Canadians rely on these sort of tropes as identifiers of who we are, and these really haven't changed in a long time, and yet Canada is a far more interesting, far more diverse place than these stock images would suggest. And so I was very fortunate to meet a guitar maker back when I was working on a do-it-yourself fair at an art center in Toronto. So there was, make your own yogurt and brew your own beer and build your own patio deck. And then there was this build your own guitar guy. And I found him very interesting because I knew a little bit about guitar making. I knew you're supposed to make guitars out of Brazilian rosewood and African ebony and Japanese maple and those kinds of things. And he was dedicated to just using Canadian wood. In fact, at the time, he was trying to build a guitar just using wood from his property, which I thought was a kind of quietly patriotic thing to do. And Canada was in a bit of a constitutional crisis at that moment. And it gave me this idea that if we use something from every province and territory of Canada, all these diverse perspectives on what the country meant to different people, that we would have a conversation starter and a way for people to engage in a more meaningful way. So I asked him, I said, do you think you could do that? Could you build a guitar using pieces from every province and territory? And he said, sure, that sounds like fun. So I set off trying to gather the pieces. And as I kind of imagined we get one or two from each province and territory, and they'd be kind of, broadly representative, kind of abstract. But as I started looking at things, and particularly as I started to talk with Indigenous Canadians about what they might like to see, that make sure that their voice was part of that conversation, the idea that the pieces should tell a story really came into the idea. And so at that point, my research really deepened, and I began to explore more communities and more stories. And I gathered the pieces that you see on the screen here. Now, some of these things are really famous. Some of them are just construction scrap or picked up off the bottom of Halifax Harbor or off of the tundra in northern Canada. But each and every one of them tells a story, and each and every one of them is part of this guitar. So this guitar took 11 years from conception to completion. We officially nicknamed the guitar Voyageur at the Festival de Voyageur that happens every year in St. Boniface, the French half of Winnipeg. And that happens in February. And if you can imagine Winnipeg in February, that is a very cold place.
Yes, I can imagine.
The person who suggested the name Voyageur was Lieutenant Colonel Susan Baharial of the Canadian Armed Forces. She really, she found out about the project and invited me to some events with the Canadian military. She had a really broad and inclusive picture of Canada, and she had that idea for the name. So we brought her out to that festival to take part in the naming ceremony, and she's been part of it ever since. So, over the course of this conversation, I can take you inside this guitar and tell you all kinds of things about it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Were all the pieces collected first before the construction happened, or was it sort of, hand in hand?
There was, I call them the anchors in the mall. There were some, some pieces that we got that were either of a significant portion of what would be required, or were of significant enough origin that these were kind of the anchors in the mall, and the conception by the guitar maker of how they would go together began to form. There were other pieces that came in much later. There were pieces that that arrived as construction had at least tentatively begun. But by then, yeah, in fact, it took about 8 years before we got our first piece. Like, a lot of that was just research and trying to raise money, which was not so successful. And then it was actually only about a 6-week building process. So he did some, his name is George Rosani. He did some preliminary work on some of the pieces as they came in, but then the sort of intensive building period was about 6 weeks between April and June of 2006.
And it's any of the pieces. I mean, you know, I'm sure they needed time to maybe dry out, or for stuff to happen to these pieces, you know, before they went into the guitar. If you had pieces of wood, for example.
Well, that's very interesting you say that, because this comes up all the time. When I originally asked him, can we build a guitar using essentially pieces of junk, you know, that I had pulled together from around the country, he said, well, actually, you know, in a way it's better for me, because it means I don't have to spend so much time curing the wood. That's already done. What has been really fascinating, and as a non-musician, I mean, I am a little bit of a musician composer, but it's electronic in a sense too. Right. I don't play the guitar, but hearing the musicians like Stephen Fearing, who have played it over many times over the years, to hear them talk about how it changes, how it softens, rounds out as those pieces forge their relationship with one another, is really interesting.
Because my initial reaction to this guitar, because I'm new to this as well, and it blew me away when I realized this is not just an ornamental piece. This is a fully functioning, playable, hand-built instrument. Yeah. You know, which blew me away. Yeah,
and you know, we stumbled out of the starting gate. It was very brittle when it debuted, and the maker put the wrong pickups in it, frankly, and you know, we were debuting in front of 80,000 people on a grand stage for Canada Day on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, in the nation's capital, and that pickup was not up to the task. So we changed that up pretty soon. And of course, again, as a non-guitar player, what was really funny to me was that one of the people who was among the first to play it on Canada Day, and there was 3 days of rehearsal before that. So the guitar was there in Ottawa, and all these musicians, famous musicians, were trying it out. And I remember Colin James, and you might be familiar with Colin James, great blues guitar player from Saskatchewan. Who played Into the Mystic on it, I will say, on Canada Day. He played the guitar, and he said to me, you know what, you're going to want to raise the action on this guitar a little bit. And I'm taking notes. Colin James says, must raise action. And then 3 days later, after Canada Day, I'm at the Mariposa Folk Festival in Orillia, Ontario, and a wonderful singer-songwriter who's a friend of mine named Danny Michel. He was so excited to see the guitar, and the first thing he said was, wow, the action's awfully high. I thought, oh no, this is my life now. I'm just going to be like adjusting.
It's very low, just a bit up, just a bit up. Constantly going around the world, changing the action. Yeah, taking notes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know.
But it's found its mojo, and it's found its place, and you know, it's one of those things where different guitar players will find different levels of comfort with it. But the great musicians, they pull their sound out of whatever instrument they're holding, right? It's where the musician meets the instrument. It's the interesting spot. So this was the debut on Canada Day on Parliament Hill. Stephen Fearing
saw his video. He made a gorgeous video about the guitar too. Yeah, he interviewed you.
And that was, I had dreamed for 11 years that his song, The Longest Road, would be the first song officially played on it. And it was, which was pretty great. But Michel Pagliaro, a great Quebec artist, Kyle Riabko, now a Broadway star. There's Colin James, whom I mentioned before. And we were guests at the Canada Day festivities on Parliament Hill for six different times overall, 5 years, and then a break,
Wow.
and then we
Yeah.
came back. What I love, Andy is an old friend of mine, a great songwriter, pop songwriter, and that quote really has defined how a lot of musicians have approached.
It's a history book you can play on. I love it.
It really is. Don Ross wrote a song for it. David Leask has written a number of songs for it. Huxley Workman, you might know, played it a couple times. Wonderful guy. The late, great Oliver Shore. Kevin Bright, amazing. One of the great performances of all time on the guitar by Kevin Bright. But from across genres and across styles and cultures, all across the country on stages large and small. So I'm sure you'll know some of these people, and some of them.
Yeah, I saw Tommy Manuel there, and so many greats.
There's Danny Michel on that famous thing. Eddie Schwartz, who wrote "Hit Me with Your Best Shot." Catherine McClellan, the daughter of Gene, wonderful songwriter. The great Bruce Coburn.
Oh yeah.
Kerry Christensen, who now lives in Europe. Feist, Stompin' Tom, Rob Baker from the Tragically Hip. All of the members of the Tragically Hip and their namesake, the great Buffy St. Marie, Gordon Lightfoot, played it as well.
And how did you manage to get? You have to travel around from festival to festival or gig to gig. I know a lot of them played at the opening. You're saying a lot of these people played at the opening ceremony, but otherwise you have to drag the guitar around from place to place. Do you? Is that how you managed to?
Yeah. So what was? I mean, it's one of the benefits of not being a guitar player, right? Because obviously people want to hear this thing.
Yeah.
And so they say, go ahead, play us a tune. And I just say, well, I can't. So, which is a great excuse to put it in people's hands, the hands of regular folks who come up and meet us at festivals. But also pretty quickly, so the right after Canada, right after our debut, I mean, I knew going into it that I wanted to somehow document the people who encountered it along the way. And Doug Nicholson is my photographer and friend. I've known him since high school. And so we conceived of this little portable photo studio that we would take with us and do portraits of people.
Yeah.
And that was useful for two reasons. One, it was a great way to share the project and create a memento for people and for us, create a sort of an asset for us. But also, we discovered, people wanted to get their hands on this thing. People wanted to touch it, which is great. I'm really happy for that. But for example, one of Wayne Gretzky's hockey sticks is on the face of the guitar, and I can show you that in another slide, which is great. But it means that when you go around, a lot of people say, "Where's Wayne Gretzky's hockey stick?" And you say, "Well, it's this little piece right here." And so immediately want to touch it, which means jamming their hand underneath the strings and putting strain on the bridge and whatever.
All that stuff, getting into the wood. Yeah.
And I don't mind them doing it, but you want that to be supervised. You want it to be careful and respectful.
Absolutely.
And so creating the portrait feature was a way so that there wasn't people clamoring. There wasn't a grab. It was, give us your email, stand in line. And when it's your time, you can have all the time you want. We'll take your picture until you're done. And so we've treated it that way, and it's free. We don't charge people for that. The festivals, pay us to mount that feature, and I won't do an event without that feature because it saves me and the guitar from undue strain. And then, of course, people want to hear it at a festival, and you want to let people know that you're there. So our agreement with the festivals is, well, you got to line up some people to play it over the course of the festival. So our advice is Friday night of the festival, put me up on stage with a short slide presentation for 10 minutes. We'll put it in the hands of, your headliner or somebody else just to kick off the festival. And then at a couple of spots over the weekend, the guitar will come to life again.
Yeah.
So that's one way, but then other musicians simply want to play it and have asked me for the opportunity. And famously, David Leask, who we can talk about later if you like too, was inspired by the presentation that I do. So I have a multimedia presentation that I do about it, parts of which you see in this conversation. He had seen the presentation a number of times and said, well, I'm really inspired to write about some of these stories that you've talked about that are embedded in the guitar. And so I suggested he take the guitar for a couple of weeks to get to know it and feel those stories. And the precedent at that point had been set by Paul O'Brien, who was the first, really, I commissioned a piece from Don Ross early, but the first person to kind of like, I just want to write about this was Paul O'Brien. And that debut still brings a tear to my eye every time I think about it.
It was an amazing performance. What I'll do as well is I will link some of these great videos from these great musicians in the link below.
That's
if people
great.
want to check them out, Paul O'Brien and David and Mr. Fearing, there's so many great videos of performances that I've seen, researching this, and after Paul made this great project known to me, and it's incredible. So you're on Instagram too, I see, which is great.
And I did a series over the course of more than a year, actually, where I went through each and every piece, and some of not only the stories of the pieces themselves, but then the surrounding stories of the travels of the guitar and the people that we've met along the way, both musicians and non-musicians. Those all get seconded automatically, posted on Twitter as well. But this is the book, which was published in 2009 by Douglas and McIntyre, which is a very prestigious, no longer existing publisher here in Canada. But the book is still available, I believe, online. What is interesting is that, of course, several important things have happened with the guitar since the book was published. And we've been adding pieces to the case and the strap over the years as well. So there's a number of stories captured in the case and the strap that are not reflected.
It's beautiful. I see the lovely Calton case behind you there as well.
Yes.
One of my first proper guitar cases was from Keith Calton himself, but the English from England.
Yes.
Yeah. And I still have it 20 years later, going strong.
Yeah.
You have a beautiful yellow Calton case there behind you, I see. And
Marigold, I believe it's called.
It's called. And even the fabric inside the case, is special. It's not just, isn't that right? It's not just straightforward like the guitar strap as well as all.
Well, the guitar case, it's the Calton Funfair inside, but we've added things, sewn things in. I don't know if you know, we had a shooting at a mosque in Quebec City a few years ago, where 6 men were killed and 19 people injured by a racist, Islamophobe guy. And so I wanted to honor those Canadians. They were Canadians, and I feel like people treated them as other. When that happened, it was like, apparently a group of Muslim men were killed at a mosque. It's like, well, group of Canadian Muslim men, actually.
Yes, more to the point. Absolutely.
More to the point. And so the mosque sent me a patch of carpet from the mosque. Oh, wow. And we have applied the names of those killed to this swatch, and those are being mounted in the case. Everything has been delayed by the coronavirus, of course. So having the work done, and so it's not where it was meant to be at this point, but it's in process. So
what a beautiful gesture, Joey! Fantastic idea and gesture, really. So literally, the Calton case. We can start with the outside. We go Calton case, Calton's amazing case company. Inside the Calton case, then, as people will see on the website or wherever, a patchwork of memorabilia.
So people might know, for example, Karen Kane, who was Canada's prima ballerina in the 1970s and beyond, and has a long artistic career with the National Ballet of Canada. So in 1972, she and her partner, Frank Augustin, won the ballet competition in Moscow with their pas de deux from Sleeping Beauty. her as the bluebird in this bluebird costume. And so we got part of that tutu, and that's been sewn into the case. Likewise, a little strip of canvas from the very first Stratford Festival tent from 1953. Some sweetgrass from 2 different First Nations, one in the west and one in the east, one from Prince Edward Island, one from Alberta. All Pierre Burton's bow tie, all kinds of stuff. Chris Hadfield, people will know Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut, who has played the guitar, and I can show you those pictures if you like to. He contributed his mission patch from his time on the International Space Station, so that's sewn into the guitar into the Calton as well. And it's important to note, I think, that Calton Canada. So Al Williams and Trudy Graham ran Calton Canada. I think, you know, with Keith, so they ran the Canadian arm, and they made fantastic cases. And then they retired, and they sold to someone from New Brunswick, an Englishman based in New Brunswick, who fumbled the ball. And so Calton North America is now based out of Boston, and they've been fantastic. They're very, very supportive, really. I mean, I've never been there. I've never talked to them in person, but they commented on my Instagram posts and stuff. They're really in the spirit of it. They get it. Yeah,
they are.
The strap was made by Levy, which was a Canadian company originally. The Levy family has an interesting history. I think they were originally from Winnipeg, but one of the sons ended up in Nova Scotia, in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, where he founded the Levy company, making guitar straps and accessories. And then his brother, who was a bit more business-minded, sort of took over the running of Levy, brought it back to Winnipeg, where the factory existed. So they were very involved. And I could show you pictures of the Levy company with the guitar. But then they got bought by Gator, I think, in Florida, in the States.
Oh, right. Oh, yes.
There you go. Like the corporate stuff happens, you know, when you don't even know it.
Absolutely. There was a story that I read on your website related to the strap. Also, a kind of a sad story about the 19-year-old. Who was killed by coyotes? Is that correct? And he used his cowboy boots as part of the strap. That's an amazing.
Hers, yeah. Her name was Taylor Mitchell, and she was actually a neighbor of mine in Toronto, and I'm in regular contact with her mom, who's lovely. And Taylor was the sad part about the story about Taylor. I mean, obviously the tragic part, but in terms of the relationship with the project. You know, she was very young. She was up and coming, and I was on the board of the of what was then the Ontario Council of Folk Festivals, now Folk Music Ontario, and so I attended. I was on the board, and then I would attend the conference, the annual conference, and then when the guitar debuted, we were a guest a couple of times at the conference. And as a 19-year-old or an 18-year-old. She was at the conference, she saw the guitar, and she was so excited by it, and she wanted to meet it, but she felt, oh, there's all these famous people who are, and so she hung back, and she didn't take her opportunity. She would have been more than welcome, of course. So she never actually encountered the guitar, and then she began to get better and better, and she embarked on her first tour of Atlantic Canada, and one night went for a walk in Cape Breton Highlands Provincial Park, and was attacked not far from the entrance by what they think might have been hybrid coyotes. Coyote attacks on people are uncommon. But anyway, she was attacked by a pack of them, and did not survive the attack. So her mother gave me part of her favorite cowboy boots that she was wearing, and we sewed those on the back as a tribute. And a little known thing is that her mother then embroidered the lyrics to one of her songs, which we rolled onto a little stick and we put in the sleeve created by the boot next to the strap. So
oh god,
it's a little Easter egg for people.
Beautiful story. Yeah.
The other tragic story,
yeah.
the other tragic story on there's unfortunately there's a fair bit of tragedy on the
yeah,
on the strap. One of them was a young boy named Miles Newts, who at age 10 in Chatham, Ontario, in southwestern Ontario, was hung on a hook on the back of a bathroom stall by some bullies at his school, and he didn't survive either. And I met his father, who spoke out about anti-bullying schemes and had his own foundation. So we were both presenting at the same school, and I thought, well, I'm in schools a lot. I talk to a lot of kids. It would be great to share your message somehow. So Miles was a big music fan and had purchased this cap, a knitted cap for himself at the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival in 1997, I believe, and 96 perhaps, and. So we took a bit of that, and that's on the strap. But perhaps most famously on the strap, Gord Downey of the Tragically Hip, who you might know, beloved here in Canada, whose death from brain cancer, he treated that illness as an opportunity to connect people and to really argue for Indigenous reconciliation here in Canada. He made that last year of his life a really grand gesture and spectacle, and it was a very generous approach that he took to this very private thing, and he made it a very public and very useful thing. And so I happen to know the woman who made his hat, his famous hat that became the signature of the tour, multiple hats. And I also happen to know the guy who custom made his shoes for the tour. And through them, I met the woman who made his famous glittery snakeskin suits for the tour. And so we got a little bit of each of those fabrics, and they created a construction that we mounted on the strap in honor of Gord Downey. And it's funny because, like, in Canada, it's sort of assumed that you're going to be a Tragically Hip fan, and I didn't think of myself as a Tragically Hip fan. I mean, I like them fine, but I didn't really, didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Until when I was sort of digitizing my music collection, and doing that weeding process back when hard drive storage was more expensive, thinking, well, what do I really want here? What do I really need? And first of all, I realized, wait a minute, I have all of the Tragically Hip CDs. I didn't realize I had.
Well, you had everyone.
Them all. I haven't had everyone. And as I went through trying to edit down to the essentials, I didn't edit anything out. I kept everything. It's like, wow, these guys are great. And I made perhaps the mistake of telling Rob Baker, the guitarist from Tragically Hip, that story when we met, and he played Voyageur briefly at an event too. So I don't know if these guys are famous in Europe. I know they're huge in Holland.
Holland. I think the Trailer Park Boys. Ring a bell.
Yeah, so they had me on their podcast, and so they gave me a little bit of their wardrobe. I don't know if you can see this little black and white bit on the front. Yes. You know what? I'll show you something else in a minute. But there's the case and the strap. That's what the case looks like. You can see where Don Cherry's pants are, and where we will keep only the waistband. That will be changed.
I see. Okay.
Chris Hatfield's mission patch. The feather is an eagle feather given to me by a Gwich'in elder in Yellowknife.
Beautiful.
Named William Greenland. There's Chris Hatfield with the guitar, who gave me the mission patch.
Gorgeous.
He sent me, by the way, this was really cool. I gave him my guitar pick as a souvenir, and didn't think too much else about it. a few months after he got back from the mission, I got a big envelope from NASA. I'm like, what is NASA writing to me for?
Really?
And inside was this certificate with my guitar pick attached, saying, Hatfield has flown this guitar pick around the earth a few thousand times. So I have this wonderful souvenir from space. But let me show you one other. This is a kind of a fun piece to talk about on the strap. This is a Japanese-Canadian baseball team that was founded in 1914. Very racist period in Canadian history. They weren't allowed to play against white teams, only against other Asian Canadian or visiting Asian teams. But they played a very, very unique and compelling brand of baseball that they called brain ball. It was a lot of, bunting, and it was very, very clever use of the field. And so they became a very hot ticket in Vancouver. By the 1930s, they were kind of the big draw in Vancouver for everybody. But of course, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, this brought the United States into the Second World War. And in Canada and the United States, these orders were issued against people of Japanese heritage, whether they had ever set foot in Japan or not.
That's right. Internment happened. Yes.
Yeah, just like unbelievable. And of
Shocking.
course, the team was dispersed to camps, mostly around British Columbia, but some in other parts of Canada as well, as far east as Ontario. And the team did not survive that, but one of their jerseys did. It wound up in the collection of the Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre in Toronto. And I worked with them for a period of time. What they eventually let me do was take a little bit of fabric from the rear of the right-hand sleeve. I replaced that with a fabric plaque that honored their contribution.
Beautiful.
It's back in the collection now on display. And the material they gave me, we mounted to the front of the strap. And of course, I wanted to publicize that we had finally got this great contribution.
Yeah.
So I worked with the Toronto Blue Jays, who every year run a day celebrating Canadian baseball history down at the Rogers Centre here in Toronto. They did a big presentation about it up on the Jumbotron. The Blue Jays mascot came out and hammed it up on the field. That's Babe Ruth's granddaughter.
Look.
Babe Ruth had a history here in Toronto. It was where he hit his first home run in a AAA league. You can actually see his face in her. It's quite remarkable. She was terrific. And then they brought out Munenori Kawasaki, who was with the Jays for just 2 years, I think it was, but he was a fan favorite. Really terrific guy. And he knew all about the Vancouver Asahi because in Japan they had just, it hadn't come out the day that we did this, but they had made, and he had seen a Japanese feature film about the Vancouver Asahi. So he came out and handed it up for us.
Fantastic.
It's pretty wonderful day.
Fantastic.
You can see a Heritage Minute about them online if you want.
Online, that's on the web, is it? Yeah, fantastic to hear all those stories. There's so much heritage in Canada anyway to begin with, but to be able to tie it all together like that is so great. And as I was discussing with Paul as well, he suggested, wouldn't it be wonderful if a lot of these countries came together and we all, Belgium had a guitar, Germany had a guitar. Imagine the history we could put together around the world, bringing people together over a guitar. The Belgian guitar, the Irish one, it would be incredible.
I had written up proposals for a number of different projects. One for a pan-European guitar. And I don't know, with Brexit, what the appetite for. I mean, I had really wanted it as a way to unify the European Union, right? To get, and so maybe a pan-European guitar is still possible. But even I read Billy Bragg's book, The Passionate Patriot, and he talks a lot in that book about how the true nature of Britain, of the United Kingdom, and of the waves and waves of immigration over centuries and centuries that actually make Britain what it is. It's not the people who are holding the St. George's Cross and whatever are talking about a sliver of history. just a sliver,
a tiny bit.
And imagine making a guitar that actually brought out all of those parts of history. So I had actually hoped to connect with Billy Bragg about doing that kind of a project, but it has not
he'd be
yet.
the man. Yeah,
Not yet
keep
happened.
at him. Keep for Billy, because that sounds like it's something that would be right up his alley.
Yeah, I would have thought so
very
too.
much so.
Keep chasing him. And I think, you know, for America right now, at a time when it has never been more divided, I thought a guitar that might knit together diverse music history in the United States. So imagine if you got, you know, something from Stax Memphis, and something from Graceland, and something from Bakersfield, California, and something from the Beach Boys. You know what I mean?
Like Grand Ole Opry, and put it all.
And something, like where you took all of American music history and tried to, you know, George Gershwin's piano bench, and you know what I mean? Yeah, I think there'd be a way to do something.
Yeah, endless possibilities.
And you know, I think the important thing too is that you want to make sure that people feel included. I mean, my guiding star for this was to make sure that nobody felt left out.
Yeah.
And especially in a country like Canada, which is so diverse internally and yet presents such a bland face to the world, you know, that the people who make up important parts of that story don't feel left out, and feel that their history is included. And you would have to do that, I think, with any other version of the project as well. You want to make sure that people feel that they haven't been overlooked. Their contribution is part of it. And perhaps this is a great way into talking about some of the materials of the guitar.
Yes, please, I'd love to.
So I'm a big fan of oysters, and Canada has, you know, we have oysters from East Coast and West Coast, and they're very different characters, and you know, it's so diverse an oyster culture. So I wanted to include something, and I figured, well, maybe I wonder if you can use oyster shell as inlay or something like that.
Yeah.
So I went to Rodney's Oyster House in Toronto. Rodney is a real character. He's originally from Prince Edward Island, and he still owns his oyster beds out there. And I said, is there anything that we could get that would be significant that we could put in this guitar? And he said, listen, if you want to get something that talks about oyster culture, you should get something from Joe LeBobe. Joe LeBobe was Mi'kmaq, Mi'kmaq, those two ways of saying this particular First Nation, this particular group, Indigenous group in Eastern Canada, who are across several provinces. And Joe was a champion oyster shucker, a reluctant one, as it turns out. But he won for a couple of years, and went to the big show in Galway back in 1975, where he came in second. So a bit of a hero. International, and the big oyster festival in Galway. So what we ended up getting was the handle of his. Well, we got his oyster shucking knife from his widow.
You did not. Wow.
What we did was we cut a circle of wood. It became the seat for the strap post and the butt end of the guitar there. So this is one of those stories that, you know, it's not of massive historical significance, but it's an important contribution from a community, a very tiny community in Canada's tiniest province. And it made a difference there. So we went to the Oyster Festival in Tyne Valley in 2006, and there was teams from all across Canada there to compete, from restaurants in every part of the country. And they all knew who he was. That's Rodney, who told me about Joe in the first place. But what was so great was that people were coming up to where we had the guitar, and they were saying, well, yeah, I heard about this guitar. It's got the Prime Minister's paddle, and it's got the famous hockey sticks, and it's got Joe's knife. Where's Joe's knife?
Where's Joe's knife?
They all knew who he was. So that's the part of the LeBobe family who I was so pleased to be able to share with them. And this is one of a series of portraits with a much larger family. But I'm very glad that we got the guitar into Genevieve's hands. She passed away back in 2009. So it was really lovely to do that. Bagels, I don't know if people know this, but you know, the Montreal bagel is it's like a very unique item of culinary heritage in Canada.
Yeah.
It's not like the New York bagel, and it's not like the European bagels. And it was a Polish immigrant by the name of Isidor Schlafman who opened Fairmount Bagel Bakery back in 1919. And it's been running ever since. We wanted to reflect that. His main competitor was Saint Viateur, and but Fairmount's truly the most historical one.
Yeah.
So we wanted to reflect that history in the guitar. When you make a bagel, you put them in and out of the ovens on that long plank that you call a shibba.
Right.
So we got one of those shibbas from the Fairmount. We cut it into a couple of very, very thin strips, and those run right down the middle of the back of the guitar, sort of the spine of the guitar. That's the great grandson of the founder.
It's a great
photo, things today. He's actually a pretty decent guitar player, as it turns out. So he got to play it for a little bit. They just turned 100 last year, or 2 years ago, 2019. But you can kind of see where they are. They're very, very close together.
Yeah.
Things just run right down there. All the rest of that beautiful tigery looking stuff, that's spalted oak. It's from the largest oak timber frame building in North America, the oldest building in Winnipeg. It was built as the Convent of the Grey Nuns of Montreal. It was a hospital. It was a seniors' residence. Louis Riel, the great rebel leader, Métis rebel leader, he went to school there for a bit. It's now the home of the St. Boniface Museum and the home to many Riel artifacts. So that forms all that. There's two dark strips on either side of the bagel pieces. Those are a door frame from the center block of our Parliament building near the Prime Minister's office. And then running right down the very center is a piece from this grain elevator in Verrigan, Saskatchewan. This was built by the Doukhobor community. This was a Russian pacifist sect that came to Canada on a grant from Leo Tolstoy. From the proceeds from his book Resurrection, he used to fund their passage to Canada. They were being persecuted by the Tsar as pacifists. They settled in Saskatchewan, had a very famous split in the community that sent the other half further west, mostly to British Columbia. But this grain elevator is part of a disappearing phenomenon, really, of the Canadian landscapes as more and more family farms, community farms become big agribusinesses. A lot of they're just not big enough. They're not modern enough. But this one is still standing straight as an arrow in Verrigan, Saskatchewan. They had us there to their heritage fair a number of years ago, and the guitar was really embraced by the community there. It was pretty much, it's a shrinking community. It wasn't really anyone under, I don't know, 55 or 60, really aging community, shrinking. But they all came out and had their portraits taken. And various communities across the country are recognized in this project for their contributions. And so you'll find their pieces in different spots.
One of the great stories from the guitar, of course, is the story about the top of the guitar, the main face. Could you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, that was kind of a remarkable journey. I don't think we didn't really know what the face of the guitar is going to be. The back and sides that I showed you from Louis Riel's schoolhouse, what had been Louis Riel's schoolhouse, we got those early, and when they arrived, these big slabs of oak, spalted oak.
Yeah.
You don't typically want oak for the back of a guitar because it's a bit more porous than you might like. But it was so striking that George instantly thought, well, this is going to be the back. But we didn't really know what the top was going to be. And we have a famous environmentalist and broadcaster here, a science journalist named Dr. David Suzuki. He's quite well known around the world as an environmental leader and scientist. And I had assembled this kind of honorary patrons list in an attempt to get funding for this project that I never got. Just brutal. But I had, Michael Ondaatje was on there, and Veronica Tennant, and a vice admiral, and it was a pretty impressive list. Donald Sutherland was on it, and I wanted to get Dr. David Suzuki on there, And so I was corresponding with him a little bit and trying to get him to lend me his name. But he was very politely demurring. He's an extremely busy guy. And then I found myself, I had a bit of a champion here in Toronto, a pair of remarkable sisters, the Zeidler sisters. So Christine Zeidler runs a remarkable hotel here, and she's like a filmmaker and a hipster and whatever. And her older sister Margie is a remarkable community leader, visionary, and their father is a famous architect. And they were trying to help me. So Margie dragged me off to a fundraising lunch and reading at the home of a very, very famous wealthy couple in Rosedale, very Tony neighborhood of Toronto. Like, this is not my milieu, right? Yeah. But I go to this lunch because she figures she can introduce me to some people with money, and maybe something will happen.
Sure.
But the guest speaker was Dr. David Suzuki, and he finishes his talk, and there's lunch, a buffet lunch to follow in their incredible garden.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there with a little plate of food and whatever, and David Suzuki comes over and he sits right next to me. So I said, "Oh, listen, nice to meet you. I'm Joey. I've been pestering you with emails for the last 6 months or whatever."
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh my goodness, Joey, I can't believe I'm meeting you today. This is remarkable because I've been thinking about you, and I've been thinking about your project."
Wow.
Have you ever heard of the golden spruce? So he told me the story of this golden spruce. This is a Sitka spruce tree with no chlorophyll in its needles.
Wow.
Now, as you know, a tree kind of needs chlorophyll to breathe. So it actually shouldn't have survived. But, the more we learn about how trees communicate with one another, it's clear that the trees around it help to protect it in a number of different ways,
right.
diverting resources towards it and so on. So it was this remarkable tree, and it was protected by a bunch of different factors. And apart from the trees themselves that really helped, this is on Haida Gwaii. So this is formerly known as Graham Island. This is off the west coast of British Columbia. A lot of annual precipitation, a lot of low cloud cover. So that helped keep the tree cool as well, as the green color should have done. It was also protected by the scientific community because people came from all over the world to study this tree. It was protected by the tourist industry because people came from all over the world just to see this tree. Protected also by the Haida community, for whom this was a sacred tree. So this was said to contain the spirit of one of their ancestors, a small boy. And they called this Kid Kias the golden spruce. And oddly enough, it was also protected by the Macmillan Bloedel Paper Company, because they actually had the right by Tree Farm License 147 to cut this tree down if they wanted to. But they knew that it was an important tree to different people for different reasons, so they kept a perimeter around it, didn't cut anywhere near it. The problem was that there was a guy who worked for them as a scout, mostly in the interior of British Columbia. So his job was to go into the forest, sometimes for weeks at a time, by himself, and figure out new places to cut down trees and figuring out new places to put in roads and pull out trees, basically planning the next clear cut. And after many years of doing this, he became disillusioned with the work that he was doing and with the attitude the company was taking to the environment. And he believed that it was really hypocritical of that company that they would protect this one tree while they clear cut millions of hectares of forest in British Columbia. So he decided to make a statement about this. And if anybody wants to know more about this, I don't name the guy myself because the Haida people don't name him either. They say for them it's like naming John Lennon's killer. You just don't do it. Don't give him satisfaction. If you want to know more about him, it's a remarkable book by John Valiant. I highly recommend it. I know his name looks like Vaillant, and as a Canadian, I would pronounce it Vaillant, but he's actually an American now living in Vancouver, so he pronounces it Valiant. Anyway, what this guy did was he gets into his kayak at Prince Rupert on the mainland of British Columbia in November 1997 at night. He paddles across what is the fourth most dangerous stretch of water in the world, very shallow, towards Masset, where he turns his kayak down the Yukon River, and he pulls his kayak up on the bank of the river, takes a chainsaw out of it, and in the middle of the night, he cuts down this tree.
No.
Now, it actually took 3 days for this tree to fall, and the Haida people that I met said that for them, this was like a drive-by shooting. And they vowed at that point they would never touch it again. They would just let it return to the earth in spirit and substance. And it stayed this way on the ground for 9 years. But then David Suzuki introduced me to some movers and shakers on Haida Gwaii, and he said, I think we can get this done. I think we can get a piece of that for your project. So I began a dialogue with that community that took about 18 months. So they would ask me questions by email. I would provide answers as best I could. They'd have community meetings, come back with more questions. And eventually they said, well, listen, we think it's okay in principle, but we're not going to do anything until we meet you. People really want to meet you and see what you're all about. So I had no money for the project at all. My credit cards were already in a disastrous state. But I knew that this could be the heart and soul of the project. And so I threw caution to the wind and paid to have a crew come out with me to make sure it was all overseen and documented properly and all that. And we flew out with no promise of anything. We just hung out for a while in Masset at the Copper Beach Guest House in town there. And people would come and have tea with us, or we would go out to the beauty salon and the barber shop and the coffee shop and just talk to people. And eventually they said, well, we think it's okay. People seem to like you, and we're okay with doing it. The problem is that we won't do it unless there's an elder present. And you need to know that all of our elders are very old, so it could be hard getting someone who's able to go with you in the forest. We do have a carver, a Haida carver. He's a hereditary chief in waiting named Leo Gagnon. He will do the cut for you. And we just said, well, you know, we're willing to take whatever comes.
Yep.
And we wrote it out at the guest house. And on the morning of February 22nd, I got a phone call from Leo, the hereditary chief in waiting. He said, the weather's clear and we have an elder. We better get going. Frank Collison was the elder who agreed to join us. And we took a couple cars down to Port Clemens, near where the tree is. We carried this little punt that you see here on our backs, first on the roof of the car, and then we carried it through the forest for about an hour-long hike. Put it into the river, took everyone over in a couple of shifts, and on the other side, this is what we found. Now, to tell you the truth, we didn't know there's going to be anything left of this tree.
It doesn't look like it was going to be usable at all, no?
No. I mean, 9 years on the ground in a rainforest is a kind of a long time. Ooh. So it could have just rotted straight through. But you can see that the way it fell, some of those upper branches, they snapped off and they acted like legs. So that kept it off the ground, which kept some of the moisture out. Right. And Leo walked up and down the length of the tree, tapping with his axe as he went until he found a spot about 2/3 of the way up. We did a little ceremony there. He fired up his chainsaw, and together we became the first people to cut into this tree since it had been felled in 1997. It was a pretty emotional moment for everybody. That's Frank Collison, the elder, and myself in a tearful embrace. Leo made relentless fun of me for my ability to cry through the course of this. Leo's a pretty remarkable guy. And first of all, we stood back and looked at this remarkable piece that had come out of the tree. Pretty much perfect. Wow. We went straight. Well, Leo said, it's yours now. You got to carry it out of here.
Away with you.
So I hiked back through the forest with this on my shoulders. And we took it straight to a mill, where we planed off these two pieces looking just like this to book match, and sent those off to the guitar maker's workshop in Nova Scotia, bundled them in blankets. It remained a very controversial as I found out even on my plane ride back from
Oh,
Haida.
you did it.
Yeah, well, it's an important origin story on Haida that is claimed by different clans
I see.
there. And so while I had the full support of one of the clans, the other clan wasn't quite so sure, although the elder that I met on that flight really wished me luck. We had a wonderful conversation, and he said, well, it seems like it's in good hands, and I wish we had been consulted more, but I feel like it's in a good place, and
Okay.
I wish you luck. So right away, George knew that he had what he needed to to create the top of a guitar, and so that's what it became. It's a remarkable piece of wood, perfect tone wood.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
The rest of the wood we left with Leo, so he will spend the next decade or more making stuff out of it. He had already started work on this piece. Just a gorgeous. This is a mask of the spirit of the tree made from the tree itself.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And there he is with it more recently. So that's Leo Gagnon with his work.
Where is Leo from?
He's from Old Masset in Haida. Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Leo. Beautiful
yeah,
work.
so I kind of feel like Leo's mask and my guitar are sort of cousins,
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
the spirit of this tree.
Gorgeous that the remaining wood can be repurposed like that.
Exactly.
Fantastic idea.
And what was really great was to be able to take the guitar back there. We got invited to a festival in Talel on Haida called the Edge of the World Festival, and so many people in the community came out, because this had been a tragic story in the community, right?
Yeah,
for years.
Of course.
And now all of a sudden here it was with new life and a new purpose, and it was just a remarkable event. This is a guy who was also introduced to us as a cousin of the spirit of the tree. His name's Mo Ingram. And this is a community that had every right not to want to participate in this project at all. This was a project that was ostensibly about Canada, and Canada had been just brutal to the Haida people over centuries. There's people who'd been here. They've recently found evidence of settlement from 14,000 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They were pretty much wiped out. Their language was forbidden. All kinds of. There are still artifacts around the world that need to be repatriated. This is Gujau. He's a leader. He was the former president of the Council of the Haida Nation, he kind of a Renaissance guy, sculptor, artist, songwriter, linguist, champion of the Haida people, and a lovely guy, pretty taciturn at times, as you can see, but he was very helpful behind the scenes. And when it came time to sort of celebrate the return of the guitar, he really ensured that people in the community came out. He came up with his daughter, and beautiful. He must have brought about 30 people up over the course of the day. I got to tell you, it's the sad part about this project has been that it's been an object lesson in the difficulties of navigating the Canadian art system.
Yeah.
Time and time again, I had people within the system say, "Well, it's a great project, but it's not my department. It doesn't really fit. Our grant is set up to do this. Our grant is set up to do that." And it straddled everything, so it didn't fit, and I was never quite eligible. And it's been a huge disappointment. I've racked up way too much debt, and it sank me, frankly. The project pre-pandemic was paying for itself in that, with speaking engagements and school projects and things like that. That all dried up, of course. So it's been a tough time, but it has been for so many people. I'm just glad to be talking to you, for one thing, and others. And David Leask is hopeful that with the success of his EP, that we can do some touring together and do a storytelling and music thing. He's written 6 songs, which you can link to. They're terrific.
I will.
But in terms of people directly supporting the project, there is a donate link on the Six String Nation website, where you can also look at tons of the portraits. I'll run through a bunch here, but they're just so beautiful. Doug Nicholson is my main photographer for those. There's a donation link, but also you can buy the book, and then you'll have the story, you'll have a great souvenir, and perhaps rescue the book from going out of print. It's in need of a refresh. I would love to do a second edition, but I'm pretty sure the publisher is not about to do that. We had our time. There was a Canadian bestseller by the numbers, but a Canadian bestseller, frankly, is about 10,000 copies. So it's not a lot.
Yeah.
It's not, saying having a Canadian bestseller is no big deal.
I'll put that link up here for a visual link for people to see as well, but it will be linked underneath.
Thank you so much.
Sixstringnation.com. It's an amazing project.
The other thing is that once we all emerged from this pandemic, this is a guitar, we got invited back in 2009 to the guitar festival. Funny enough, so Don Ross, you know Don Ross, and Don Ross had been a guest of this festival called Un Paese Assai Corde in Piemonte, Italy. And he asked his hosts at one point, he said, so what does that actually mean, Un Paese Assai Corde? And they said, it's like a six-string nation, And he said, well, that's so funny you say that, because I know this guy, and he's got this project that I've been involved with a little bit, and wrote a song for, and they invited us to the festival. They made Voyageur the kind of emblem of the festival that year. It's like a serious guitar players festival, and that's where Tony McManus and Tony Emanuel and all those people will play, and Don Ross. And they were the most extraordinary, lovely people. And what amazed me, we came through Milan, and Domenico, who had set up this festival, who was the artistic director of the festival, had set up an appearance for us at a guitar store in Milan. And I thought, okay, glad to go, but who's going to be interested? Sure. We showed up at this guitar store, and there's about, I don't know, maybe 20 curious guitar fans, but they had done a feature about the guitar in Guitar magazine in Italy. So there's some aficionados knew about it, and this lovely guy, Marco, I remember his name was, he came up to me and he said, it's my dream to play this guitar. I mean, can you imagine? Like, I've come all this way. I've done this thing for Canada, hoping it would resonate with Canadians, and struggled the whole way. And I get to Italy, and here's someone who says, this is my dream, to play this guitar. And so it was really embraced by the festival and by its attendees. I can share some remarkable photos of that too, if you like. But boy, oh boy, what an adventure that was. So I know that this guitar connects with people who are curious about Canada and its history and its story and Canadian music. And really the dream is to get invited to Europe. Really, what I would like to do is bring the festival experience that we already do in Canada and that we did in Italy, and bring it to the rest of Europe, and broaden the base of portraits that we have from around the world.
Oh yeah, well that would be fantastic. There are some great festivals over here, and between Holland, Germany, and Belgium, I'm sure once the dust settles on this pandemic, surely we can make that happen. Joey, I'd love to see it happen for you, because it's such an important project, not only for Canada but for the world. It's the flagship of everything to do with guitar building, community spirit, you name it. It's all encompassed in that project, and you should be very proud of yourself for putting it together. It's a huge feat, and I hope to hear more about it in the future, and I hope that someday at least the Canadian government will get behind you and push this thing forward to where it really deserves to be on a world stage.
Well, thank you. Then we can get it in your hands, right?
Yeah, I come over here and I stick it on the wall here and play it. No, I won't. I'd love to get, one day. It's my dream now to get hold of the Voyageur and play a few songs on it. And absolutely, and a lot of people out here will be very interested in getting to play a song or two on the guitar. And I'll come back to you and say, the action's a bit high, Joey. Just take it down a touch. Just take it. Thanks very much for being here today with us, all the way from Toronto in Canada, Joey, and the very best of luck with all future endeavors. And I look forward to hearing more about the Six String Nation down the road.
Thank you so much for this lovely conversation, and I look forward to meeting you in person and getting this guitar in your hands.
Thanks very much.
I'm standing at a window, I'm pressed against the past. I'm looking on in black and white through the eyes of photographs, and I'm falling into faces, cultivated smiles, two-dimensional. Je me souviens, Canada. Out of Gastown in the morning, on a train in 69, into the arc well of the rising sun, we left the coast behind. And the wheels roll in the rhythm, and I heard in them for the first time the endless song of traveling out of Canada. Oh, Canada, the longest road I've known, paved with the kind of broken hearts that lead to broken homes. Looking backwards, I remember the cracks in all the paving stones, the distances I've traveled out of Canada. Dog days of the prairies, the boundless sky above our heads, my stepfather looked for mountains in the streets of Winnipeg, and he told them that my mother's love had stole his heart away, and we all stood there posed for Polaroids of Canada. Oh, Canada, the longest road I've known, paved with the kind of broken hearts that lead to broken homes. Looking backwards, I remember the cracks in all the paving stones, the distances I've traveled out of Canada. I awoke wrapped in my mother's arms on the docks of Montreal. The ships lit like Christmas and the moon a swollen ball. When the sailors spoke of England, I'd never felt so small. Till the ocean turned from emerald to gray. The wind threshed the water and washed our wake away, and the seagulls blew like words back to the mouth of the St. Lawrence's. We sailed out on the Emperors of Canada. Oh, Canada, the longest road I've known, paved with the kind of broken hearts that lead to broken homes. Looking backwards, I remember the cracks in all the paving stones, the distances I've traveled out of Canada. The first country of my youth, my heart was ever drawn to you like a tongue to a broken tooth. In a world where everyone was always leaving, I was trying to keep my fingertips on